So now that we've looked at the characteristics and functions of verbal communication, let's go into how we can have cooperative verbal communication. Keeping in mind that sometimes that's a little bit easier said than done. We'll look in particular about how to have understandable messages, using I language, and even using we language. Now, to have understandable messages, we need to be informative. In our low context culture here in the US, the more details usually means the better. So sharing the information that we've gained isn't necessarily seen as a bad thing here. It's seen as a good thing to share more as opposed to sharing less. Remember to be honest. At times that's not always easy, but when you're honest, you're creating a space to where more honesty will occur with others. I remember in grad school having a professor talk about significant choice. I thought this was a strange idea. He said that with significant choice, a person should always give full disclosure on any information that someone may need to make a choice for themselves. And that we should be honest about what information is out there, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And that way, a person can make a significant choice. They can have a decision that really helps them do the best thing for them at the moment. And I just thought that was very interesting. Also remember to be relevant. It's really easy to go off topic and just go down what I call rabbit holes. But remember that to help somebody understand your message, you have to stay on topic and be relevant. I know I've heard plenty of friends who tell a story and then they circle around and around and around to the end where I'm just confused about what the story really is even about. Remember, try to be clear. And I said try to be clear here because, again, easier said than done. Now, when there is misunderstanding, be prepared to deal with that misunderstanding dead on. The best way to deal with misunderstanding is to use I language, not you language. You language puts the attention and the blame on the other person. For example, you messed up. Right? That, even when you can hear it, it puts people on the defensive. Whereas I language takes ownership of the feelings and opinions and beliefs that you have. I don't like this event. That doesn't put somebody on the defensive. It refers back to the person who said the statement. Now it may seem trivial or insignificant or really minor to say that we should use I language as opposed to you language. But the best place to see this happen is in an argument with two people who are really, really upset. If you have two people who are going back and forth with you language, it will just get more intense because they're blaming the other person. You don't do this. Well, you always do this. You think you're so up. It just spirals. But when someone stops and uses I language, I'm sorry, or I shouldn't have done that. I take ownership for my responsibility. Again, it pulls people to say, oh, this isn't about you blaming me or attacking me. This is about us addressing the issue. At times, it's even important to think about not just using I language, but using we language. We language signals closeness and inclusion. It's going to reflect a more satisfied relationship. I remember a few semesters back, I had a student, and she was talking about her boyfriend that she had been dating for 3 years. And she said that when she talked about the relationship, she always used we. We should do this one day. We should do this one day. We should go here. We should buy this. We should consider that. But when he talked about his future, it was always, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it concerned her that she was using we language and that he was using I language. When the classmates heard that particular story, quite a few of them looked at each other with that, they won't last long type of look. And it was so strange to get a feeling that just in how we use the word I or we made all the difference in how close she felt to her partner and even how other people perceived the strength of that relationship. When we think about verbal communication, we also need to think about gender stereotypes as well. Stereotypes prevail that men are more direct and women are more indirect. Now, this is often the case because boys are usually taught that to be manly, you need to say what you mean, whereas women, as girls, are taught it's unladylike to just be direct. And it kind of feeds a negative cycle, right? That, oh, well, this is the way men and women are, and that's actually the way we've been taught. Keep in mind that both men and women can vary their language based on the context. There have been times where I've had guy friends who have been very indirect. And I said, okay, just tell me what it is. And there have been times where I've been told I was a little too direct. And that maybe hurt somebody's feelings and I should have been a little bit more indirect. So it varies. Even think about culture and how it affects somebody's verbal communication. Now, we've already talked about high context and low context culture. How the words may be different, how people approach those words may be different. And even if you think back to our cultural chapter, we talked about communication accommodation theory. That when we accommodate our language style to meet somebody else's, they usually perceive us as more competent and more friendly. Now, there are some barriers to verbal communication, one of the big ones being communication apprehension. It may be the big speech that you have to give in speech class, right? Or maybe you have to have a conversation with your boss. Or you need to break up with your current partner. All of those can cause some communication apprehension, some fear or anxiety about the associated communication. That can be done in a face-to-face format, in an electronic format, in a one-on-one, in a large group. As long as there's some anxiety there, it's communication apprehension. The best way to deal with this is having a communication plan. Have plan actions. How would you go in and say what you want to say to this person? Plan the wording out. Plan even your tone to some degree. And then also consider the planned contingencies. How do you think the person that you're talking to will respond when you say XYZ? How will you respond to them back? Now, not only do we have to deal with our communication apprehension, but we also have to deal with defensive communication. At times, we get criticisms and even insults, and this can cause us to feel defensive. Now, there are 4 types of defensive communication out there. Dogmatic messages are those that when we hear a constructive criticism, we just refuse to consider it, and we believe that the behaviors that we're already doing are already acceptable. Such as, this is the right way to do it. Well, what if it's not the right way, right? But dogmatic message doesn't really leave much wiggle room. Think about superiority messages. Have you ever been told by someone, well, I already know what I'm doing here. I've done this before. You should just listen to me. Though that was a superiority message. Sometimes there's even the indifference message. I don't care what you have to say. Or even the control message. There's nothing that you can say or do to convince me, so therefore you should just be quiet. All of those messages come from a place of defensiveness. So if you ever get someone responding in that way, be aware that's where they're coming from. hopefully it does not go to a place much stronger than maybe just defensiveness and doesn't get to the level of verbal aggression. A clear way of knowing if it's gotten to a state of verbal aggression is when the person starts to attack self-concepts, i.e., the person starts to insult you. It's no longer about dealing with the problem. It's more about insulting what you do, how you do it, and making you feel bad about who you are in some way. When this type of verbal aggression continues on over an extended period of time, or someone's consistently attacking your self-concept, that is considered bullying. Usually we can say, oh, you're bullying me when someone insults us. But no, bullying is really when it's extended over a period of time. Now, why are some people verbally aggressive? Sometimes it's just that aggression comes from a temporary mental state. They're in a negative situation, and so they vent out that negative situation onto you. Maybe they're dealing with some chronic hostility. Maybe they haven't actually processed their own emotions in a way that's healthy, and so they're taking it out on other people. If you find yourself consistently communicating in a verbally aggressive fashion, make sure that you address those issues. Why are you so angry? Why are you lashing out at those around you? Is it that you're upset? You're stressed out? Do you need to seek professional assistance? And if you're communicating with people who are verbally aggressive towards you, be aware that you don't have to take it. You can avoid that communication. Secondly, you can also try to minimize that person's effect. I know that someone insulted me and made me feel bad about myself, and my reaction was to move away from them and get space. And then when I felt like they were in a better place with me, then I opened the door back up. But I slowly opened that door back up. I wanted them to realize they were not allowed to make me feel bad about who I am. Another barrier is deception. If we look at McCornack, it says that it's deliberate use of uninformative, untruthful, irrelevant, or vague language for the purpose of misleading others. Essentially, it's tricking people, lying to people. Sometimes this can be the outright bold-faced lie, and sometimes it can even just be not telling the whole truth or omission, which we also know as concealment, where we start leaving out some information. All of these can be very hurtful to having cooperative verbal communication. Now, as we think about the power of verbal communication, remember, it's so symbolic, yet it has rules, but then we break those rules because language is really flexible. Our language is an epitome of who we are as people because it shows off our culture. It shows who we are because it's how we've named ourselves. It's how people have named us. But it can also be quite harmful when we think about the way that it can be used to destroy other people's self-concept. When we think about the ways that it can make people feel inferior or feel disconnected from each other. Language in itself is very powerful. So I hope you've understood the characteristics, functions, and the cooperative ways and barriers that we communicate every single day.